Good evening and welcome to Sir John Soane's Museum, to those of you here in the room and everyone joining us online around the world. My name is Bruce Boucher. I'm the director of Sir John Soane's Museum, and we're pleased to have you here as we host the Soane Medal Lecture in what was Sir John Soane's library dining room. The Soane Medal and its accompanying lecture continues the mission of Sir John Soane to encourage a better understanding of the built environment and its central importance to all of our lives. Established in 2017, it was spearheaded by our former trustee, Sir David Chipperfield. The medal's reputation now as an internationally recognized reward wouldn't have been possible without the support initially of the Rolex Institute and this year of Hamish and Sophie Forsyth. Their support has enabled us to develop the format, promote the themes of the talks, and reach more and more audiences online each year, for which we are supremely grateful. The purpose of this medal is to recognize architects, educators, or critics who have made a major contribution to their field through practice, history, or theory, and in doing so have furthered and enriched the public understanding of architecture. Previous winners are Peter Barber, Marina Tabassum, Denise Scott-Brown, Kenneth Frampton, and Raphael Moneo. This year's recipients, Anne Lacaton and Jean-Philippe Vassal, have been celebrated for over 30 years for their honest design approach, both in new buildings and renovations. Through the resourceful repurposing of materials and existing structures, Lacaton and Vassal's practice seeks to avoid unnecessary waste, transforming buildings in a way which benefits occupants, the local communities, and the surrounding ecology. Lacaton and Vassal established their international practice in Paris in 1987, working on public buildings, housing, and urban planning. All projects are grounded in a principle of generosity and economy, with the aim of changing the standard of architecture and a strong commitment to sustainability and social impact. We will be hearing about their unique approach in tonight's lecture. In 2021, Anne Lacaton and Jean-Philippe Vassal received the Pritzker Architecture Prize. They have been the recipients of many other awards and citations over the years, and it is my great pleasure and privilege to add to these many accolades tonight by presenting Anne and Jean-Philippe with the Soane Medal for 2023. Would you like to come up?
Thank you very much.
It's clearly an honor to be there and to receive this medal. It's crazy, but I visited the place for the first time this afternoon with a fantastic presentation, and it's another extraordinary space made by architects, an extraordinary story made by architects. The life of architects is absolutely incredible, and it's so important to visit this space, to understand the space. So we are happy to make a lecture here, but yes, because of this place, even more, and we will try to make it as best as we can. So it's, I will start and we'll continue. It's just some simple principles. And it comes perhaps for a moment where, after my diploma, I went to Africa. And it is the simplicity in building, simple gestures, like planting some branches in the sand to bend them with the inhabitants of the village very close, to start to surround them with straw that leaves the air crossing through all around the straw hut, and then to place another straw on the roof that will prevent, when there is raining, to come inside, because it is much more thin. In fact, the plan, the drawing has been done many years after we live near, with the inhabitants of the village and with very simple gestures. It is to build with the climate and not fighting against. We have always been very impressed by the greenhouses, the botanical gardens, this lightness of the structures, and also with the professional greenhouses, where this ventilation, natural ventilation, the system of filtering, shading, and taking the energy of the sun is possible in order for plants to grow. And we have tried to adapt this to winter gardens in the dwelling and in the flats, like this project. The relations between inside and outside, to live in this space at the limit of the outside and the inside, is so important. Build double. We start to do it for this family Latapi in Bordeaux. The budget was minimum. It was 30 years ago, and they adjust the budget for a minimum house, only 60,000 euros, and normally with 60,000 euros you can have 60 square meters. And in fact, with them we arrived to this point where the surface is 3 times more, 180 square meters, but the budget was strictly the same, 60,000 euros. And it is just thinking to organize the space differently, to work with other materials, to take this energy of the sun on the east facade, and to create places for living. We learn a lot with this house and with family Latapi, and we still have very good relations with them when we met them in Bordeaux. We make these plans because some years ago, Yvonne Farrell and Shelley McNamara, at the Biennale of Venice, they placed this topic about free space. What is free space? And in fact, and we work in the same way when we make social housing dwellings, 14 dwellings in Mulhouse, working with this idea of basic structure and with a bioclimatic envelope that it is taken from the professional greenhouses technology. Just these simple principles, very simple concrete structure, and on top of it, the system creates an envelope that will create the conditions for climate. Then it is to divide the space in order to create different dwellings. And here again, we see in blue this additional space, this extra space that will give more generosity, more possibility, more capacity for the users to live inside. And then with this additional space, it gives the possibility of more possibility of choice, to invite more people, to have a better condition and relations with the light outside. And it is interesting to come several years after to see how these spaces have offered the capacity of the life to be generous and create qualities. So in that case, it was simple. We had the budget that was normally one flat could be 70 square meters, and in fact here again we give the possibility to make flats that are 2 or 3 times bigger. And then the interesting discussions with the owner, with the social housing client, it is, if the flats are bigger, I should have to rent them more expensive. But in fact, there is another possibility to say, if your budget, you pay for this amount of money, and this is the same as the standard one, finally, why should be a reason to make the rent higher?
And he accepted.
And he accepted. Build double, it's not only for housing, it is also for example, a school of architecture, a public building in the city of Nantes, close to the river. And it is to see how, starting from the program of 12,000 square meters, it is possible to imagine in the same budget a project that could be 2 or 3 times bigger, that will create more possibilities and more facility. Each one with very high capacity of loading, 1 ton by square meters, and with the possibility with a ramp, like a street, to join the ground floor to the first level, second level, and then to reach the roof. It's kind of big infrastructure that will provide a lot of space in which the School of Architecture will be able to take place. Space in construction. And here again we can see in blue the free space. It means the space that in fact you can create as an extra space that doesn't correspond like other roofs in which the School of Architecture will take place. And we will have inside this 2 different climates, the standard one, the one what is heated in green, and the blue one that it is a kind of intermediate climate between the outside climate and the inside climate. And then it gives the possibility for the School of Architecture to develop spaces of freedom. I will show some images. A big atelier where you have different possibilities of concert, of models, of fashion défilé, the big auditorium that can open to the river. So always these kind of relations between inside and outside, possibility to dance, but also to use these large spaces well illuminated by the transparency, to have this possibility of vision to the Loire. And you see precisely here one professor that it is making a class in a space that it is not normally a classroom, just in that extra space. Spaces where the students can invent different situations, just sometimes looking at outside and climbing the ramp. Spaces that can be empty or filled, views, transparency, using the outside as also as the inside, making some classes outside, taking the sun, climbing the ramp, running, and going to the roof where you can have big parties, but also install a cinema room in the summer. So to give and to try to give freedom. It is also important to consider the existing. The first resource, it is the existing, what is already there. And for example, even when the landscape is wonderful, it is close to Bordeaux and the ocean. Here the project was for a villa, and when you arrive on a site, you can avoid to cut the pine trees that are already there, or to demolish the sand dune on which your house can take place, and precisely how you can work and make your project with the existing. In that case, no one tree was cut. We had 50 trees on the site, and precisely all of them have been precisely cut. The challenge was to say...
Kept.
Sorry. So it is to imagine the structure, steel structure, mixing with the structure of the forest, using the reflection of the water on the sea to bring it on the... build with the existing, it is in all situations. It is the best ones or the most difficult ones, precisely in the suburbs around Paris or around the big cities in France. The question it is to do with the existing, or it is possible to take other alternatives than the demolition. So it means to consider, to look precisely at the situations, to look precisely at the people living in these situations, and instead of demolition, to transform, to reuse, to upgrade, to extend life, to reinvent, and to do more with less. Instead of demolition and reconstruction, there was a big program in France these last 20 years about demolition of more than 200,000 flats and just rebuilding of 150,000 and spending a lot of money just for that, losing flats. I think there is another alternative. When demolition and reconstruction could be 165,000 euros by dwelling, we can see that no demolition, but radical transformation can be 3 times less. So it's why we work with a friend, Frédéric Druot, on this study. We call it plus. So it means in all situations, the question is to add. Never demolish, always add. And taking, even sometimes it's difficult to see them, the qualities of the existing. Because there is always qualities in the existing. Bigger, and to see how we can extend from the inside to the outside. Or it is possible to find, instead of demolishing, reusing, rethinking of new programs, other possibilities, other facilities, another kind of generosity. Places where you can wash your clothes, places where you can meet your neighbors to look at the film, or you can have a kitchen and cooking, places where you can meet, and instead of empty spaces, use them. And we'll continue.
So with following this study, the PLUS, which was in a way in contradiction with the program of the state of demolishing and rebuilding, we had the opportunity to develop some very few number of projects, and this one is the last one that we completed in Bordeaux some years ago. And this is very important, and that we learned from this research is that we should never stay outside from these places, because looking at these places from outside, from far away, you can also say that that's ugly. And if you say it's a situation, you return in the office or somewhere in the administration, and also there is a red cross on it, okay, tear down and replace it by something. What is important is to consider that inside this block, a lot of people are living. And that you cannot just eliminate one building like this without visiting the inside. And inside, it's 530 very different situations, a lot of collections. People are really collectioners of everything. And most of them, they take really care of and of course, it's something that reminds us of a lot of things we saw there. But it's very, very touching to see how the people, they take care of their interior space, and they give a value and they give a richness. And while the value is not visible from outside, from inside, it's amazing. So after the visit, you don't see the building in the same way, and you think that finally you have not to renovate one building, but you have to change the living space of 530 families. So it's a work that starts from inside out, to consider the value, the positive, because always looking at the negative first always leads to take hard decisions, while it's more important to think and to see, to observe what is good. And from what is good, you can afterwards correct or change or add something that makes the situation better. So starting from inside, we checked what was not working well. First, the apartments has not enough light. They had no outdoor space to go out. And there were some rooms which were a bit small, but not so many. So we proposed that first to do the renovation without emptying the building, so while all the families could stay inside during the renovation. And second, to give more space by an addition of 4 meters in front of every apartment to make a kind of winter garden that would allow also to open all the windows, transform into doors, and a precise project that makes the situation acceptable during the works. So it means no important works on the structures. All the renovations could be made from inside. We renovated all the bathrooms, all the electricity, toilets, sometimes a kitchen, and sometimes repainting when the situation was not very good. And again, this is this extra space which was given to all apartments without any selection, because if it's good for one, it's good for 530. So, and afterwards, that was a competition. We won the competition and we started the work. This kind of renovation requires to anticipate a lot of issues and to prepare very well the construction that was done, and we could make this extension. So this is and from this situation, and again by a work of transforming the space from inside, by improving the comfort, the climatic comfort, the energy saving, and so we were invited by the municipality to take part to a program of embellishment of the squares of the city. And we had to work on this square, which was a very small square in a neighborhood, not in the center, but very in a kind of little isolated neighborhood. And we had 4 months to provide a project and to come back with a project of, I don't know, embellishment of the square. So we went there a few times, different days, the weekend, and we observed very carefully the situation. We tried to look at the quality, the beauty of the place. And 4 months later, we came back to the cinema, photography museum, and so on. Until the early 90s, the state decided to engage a project, a huge project of renovation, to make a new museum for cinema, visual arts there. But unfortunately, after a few years and 1 year of construction, the state decided to stop the project, and the place remained in this situation for a couple of years. They started to see some damages. The rain water was falling inside, and so on. And finally, the Ministry of Culture decided to put there a temporary project for a center for young contemporary art creation, which was a kind of installation. So it was not supposed to be a huge renovation, but just a project for 5 years. And we were invited for this very light competition because they wanted to do it very fast. The place is 26,000 square meters. You see the state where it was, and the budget was 3 million. So the topic of the competition was what can you do for 3 million in this place? So there was not a requirement of making a project, but just giving ideas. And we arrived with a proposal which was, again, the space is, the architecture is already there. There is no need to add any architecture. And the project is to try to start repairing and to see what we can do with the 3 million at the minimum to repair the structure, to bring again electricity, elevators, stairs, and to see what we could open. So after this first phase for the 3 million, we could open 7,000 square meters for exhibitions. And after the 5 years, finally, due to the success of the place, the state decided to continue this temporary project and to give another phase of works. And the second phase was a little higher, 13 millions. But then we did also another step of repairing all the roofs. And we opened for the second phase 26,000 square meters for exhibition for art. There is from the basement to second floor. And in fact, here we saw that it was not necessary to bring much more than just the reparation of the columns, of the floors, because the space was, it was a space made for a museum. Even if it appears in a ruin, it's not, it's a ruin of a museum. So all the qualities, all the ingredients were there to make a museum. The natural light, the different spaces, the way to move from the different levels. So it was just enough to see that and to create the conditions so that it could reopen again for artists and for the public. So treat all the fire security and all of this, but a lot of things invisible, but that was enough to reopen the place, and which is today still very, very successful with very interesting exhibitions. So, and the first thing is the same as for the trees. It's the same as for even the blocks, which doesn't appear very of quality. It's important to look carefully to everything and to try to find where is the beauty, where is the quality before thinking anything. So that was various. There are various exhibitions in these places. A lot of performances. So, and from the basement, which was never open to the public because it was the reserves of the museum, but today it's not a museum, so they don't need any more reserves. And also the basement finally was interesting also to make a exhibition space because it's very appropriate for video instead of making the dark in light space. This is very appropriate. And another principle, which is do not build and build up France on the North Sea. And this was the last industrial hall remaining from a very large shipyard that was dismantled in the 80s. And in fact, the region, the city, kept this building because there was a big pressure from the inhabitants and from the workers from this shipyard, because it was here the last hall where the boats were finally assembled before they moved to the sea. So that was a kind of symbol of the lost shipyard that was very important, and the city decided to keep this one totally alone in the middle of nowhere at the time, and they decided to put a contemporary art center inside. So again, when we visited the site, and of course the purple competition, so we have also to analyze what is the risk and what should we do, so finally we decided not to follow the brief, and we proposed to keep the void as it is and to make a double, exactly the twin, the same dimension, not to compete, not to be more demonstrative, but just exactly the same, but built with contemporary architecture and contemporary construction. And in this new building, there was all the program of the new spaces, so different floors to store artworks, but also to make exhibition spaces. And again, the extra space, in this case, is not what we built of the new building with the stairs, which are always out of the exhibition room. And what is also very exceptional is that we are very close to the North Sea. But when you are on the ground, you don't see it because they are kind of, I don't know the word, dig, don't know the word in English.
Dike.
A dike that prevents to see. So it was also interesting to see that going up, we could gain this view on the fantastic landscape, and then coming into the building and looking to the exhibition with various spaces, and sometimes in double height. And also this last level, which is not part of the brief, but it's an extra space under this transparent roof, because the building is designed as a kind of block with all the, the good conditions to keep artworks, but also a double envelope, which allows also to create a buffer zone between inside and outside, and it's also a way to save the energy. But this space is has not a control condition, but it's used for many events and exhibition. And this is a gap between the two buildings, because we were supposed to let the street there for the bikes or pedestrian circulation. But from the new building, we have some platforms which also allow to look into the void and to have the perception of this space. We also reinstalled the moving cranes, and now an artist has transformed it into a kind of scanner, which is moving sometimes in the day. And the walk into the building allows sometimes to look at the existing, sometimes to look outside, or sometimes to come into the exhibition room and to remain focused on the art. And this is the final result. So this is some of our principle of our design philosophy, and which are all of them. They are based first on a very attentive and kind observation of what we have in the hands, because we consider that it's very important, and that it's from this situation that we take the inspiration and the design of the projects. So thank you very much.
So a huge thank you to Anne and Jean-Philippe for that wonderful lecture, stroke manifesto of your work. Having admired it for so long, it was so thrilling to hear you talking about it and to see that your underlying principles reflect the generosity, the thoughtfulness, the compassion of the work. For all of you, I'm Alice Rawsthorn, and it was my pleasure this year to be chair of the Soane Medal jury. And when David Chipperfield conceived the idea for the Soane Medal, his objective was to stimulate debate about architecture, its impact on our lives, practically and culturally. And when I and my fellow jurors, many of whom are with us this evening, Bruce, Edwin Heathcote, Stephanie MacDonald, Eric Parry, Ingrid Schroeder, Tom Weaver, and Armin Taha, who will be the chair of the jury next year, when we discussed possible medalists for this year, we were convinced that having already made such important contributions to the architectural debate through your own practice, your writing and teaching, your Soane Medal Lecture would be irresistible, and so it has been. So thank you very much. Now, I have a couple of questions for you, and then you will have the opportunity to ask questions from the floor, so thinking caps on. So first of all, when you started out as young, ambitious architects, how receptive were prospective clients to your approach, and what have been the milestones that have enabled you to win them over the years?
I think we showed the first house. It was this couple, this family Latapy in Bordeaux, and at this time they don't know really what was an architect, and we don't know what really was a client. And we started. So we
learned together.
We started an adventure. They just explained their dreams, and we understood that their dreams, it was very often linked and related to the place where they're taking holidays. So in Portugal, close to the ocean, etc. And finally, they were with their camping car. They were taking out the tables and the chairs, and they were just sitting in front of the ocean. And we start to say them, but this is the most beautiful living room. And finally, we try to change the ideas, because in their mind, the idea was just this simple house that you have at the cheapest price, etc. And we start to make them dreaming, probably. And after that, there was one thing that was clear. They would not have 10 euro more than their budget. So we had to work hard during 1 year and a half to make this house. And I think for this house, we learn everything. So it was clear that it was not in the architectural reviews that we will find the solution.
Yeah.
So we try to see, to observe where the constructions was efficient, economic, robust, radical, and we go to the greenhouses, we find their interest in working with the climate, we find some solutions, and finally we have done this house. So it is a fantastic experience. And after that we try to keep this experience in mind. So, and perhaps what is interesting, it is when we work at the scale of the family, of the flat, and when you work hard for this purpose, when you have 530 families to take in considerations, you think at each of them and not at the building in general. And I think this is very important.
So the family, the Letapis, they say something very nice now. They say, we met, we discuss, we listen them, and we let them do.
Perfect.
And they say also something very touching for us that in 30 years, the house has never constrained us. And this is really, for an architect, it's very nice to hear that, because it's something that when we design projects, it's a permanent concern, how we can make an architecture which is not constraining, but offering or giving freedom.
And one of the wonderful things about listening to the lecture was identifying the defining principles of your work, which have clearly continued over time in all your projects. But architecture is, of course, a ubiquitous force in an increasingly complex, constantly changing, broader context. So how have those changes affected the principles of your architecture over the years of your practice?
We try to, that it don't affect the practice, the design, the project. So it's important that around the project we arrive to create a bubble of freedom, a bubble of thinking, a bubble, and to try to make all these things that takes more and more importance, the bureaucracy, the normatives, more and more normatives, more and more, that really, that doesn't let you brace. But we try to, and also probably we are lucky to have a little experience, and that we know when we have to keep it away. And but of course we need to fulfill all these requirements. But it's more and more difficult, and probably we arrive today to a point where we don't know in which direction we can find this brace, this time, this freedom.
It is also to keep with a kind of good sense, something that why we say keep to build simply, and to think about simple gestures. You have some, when sometimes it's a bit too warm, you open the window, or when it's too much light, you close the curtain. So just keep in mind this, and don't think that it is a machine that will do all of that for you. And I think this is important. For example, when we work with these winter gardens with different layers, in fact, it is to consider that the building itself is like a body. And a body, you don't have the same coat in winter and in summer. So you change. You have another, you take in one, or you bring another one. So a building, it should be the same. So sometimes the winter garden is closed, sometimes the winter garden is open. Sometimes you close the curtains, sometimes you open the curtains. So in function of season, in function of day, of night. So it is very simple. And because these gestures are very easy to understand, the people, they understand very clearly that their comfort, it is just to use these elements. And by the way, this simple way of using the space, it creates a kind of economy of energy, because just by making the right movements, we are touching this question of ecology and energy consumption. And I think it is, when we started to work, we are not so much considering this question of ecology. But finally we see that now when we say working with the existing, trying to keep the existing resources, transform some buildings. An hospital, it can become flats, offices can be transformed, etc. Working with the existing, it means to observe precisely, to see the quality, to see the possibility of interpretation. And by the way, it is something that today we are talking about sustainability.
Yes, of course. I mean, everything you say sounds so logical and rational and full of common sense and being rooted in the needs of the individuals and the communities you're designing for. It's astonishing that this isn't universally observed throughout architecture. As a final question from me before I open it up, could you mention just a couple of the key projects that you're working on now?
Currently, we are working on 3 very interesting projects. All the projects are interesting, and we were lucky that we always had to work on interesting projects. So currently, we work on the renovation of a big theater in Hamburg, and this theater is very specific because it was temporarily installed in a factory 40 years ago. And starting from one venue, now they have 7 venues, and it's a very famous place. It's a national state theater. So there's today it's a very famous theater. A lot of public, a lot of good productions, good creations, and the topic of this renovation is how to keep the spirit of this place, the spirit of the factory, but also improving the quality of the theater and the stage technology and so on. And also working on the economy of energy without transforming the building into a very standard building with insulation. So it's a very challenging and interesting project, but we have also to do some additions for new places for research or rehearsal and so on. The second project is a residence for artists in the little cultural center in Alula in Saudi Arabia. It's a French Saudi project. And the third one is a competition. It's the renovation of the interior space of the Centre Pompidou in Paris from Piano and Rogers. And they will renovate the facade and so on, but they want also to change, not to change, but to try to return to the original project with large platforms, step by step. All of this has been closed, partitioned, and the purpose is to see how we could find again the freedom of the beginning and of this extraordinary space.
Well, such exciting projects to work on. So are there any questions from the audience? If you could raise your hands and wait for the microphone. There.
Hi there. Thanks so much for that. It was really fascinating. I'm really interested in how you mentioned the 530 families, and also just wanted to praise the way you really seem to listen as architects, because so much can feel like a speech from the architect, but it really felt like your projects were conversations. Did you get to receive any of their feedback after the project firsthand? And I'm really fascinated to see how that might have affected you and rewarded you. So did you receive any direct feedback from the families that benefited?
During the project or afterwards?
After, really. After? Because I know you've probably had, it seems like you had a lot of emotion with the project, so I imagine you did meet them and get to know them. So after the project, I'm really interested in how they reacted.
No, I think it's very, very positive. It's very positive, but also for many reasons. First, it is that because at the beginning, there was a possibility that these buildings to be demolished. And we know that the people, they are, even if sometimes in some situations the conditions are difficult, they are really attached to the neighborhood, to their friends, to where they live, to the school that is close to the place, etc. And when there is a necessity to demolish and to rebuild, people, they don't know where they will go. Perhaps they will go in another part of the city, etc. So it's very damaging. So this was a big fear at the beginning. The second one, it was that the transformation could increase the rents. And for that, we had discussions, very interesting discussions. And it is a kind of, it's about the economy of the city. it means that you have one solution where you have 530 flats and you demolish 530 flats and perhaps you will build 500 new ones. So you can know the cost of this. And in function of that, if you make a project that will add some spaces, that at the end the flats will be bigger than what will be done in the standard, and that it costs 3 times less, there is no reasons in certain points to increase the rents, because finally the economy, the general economy for the city will be much less, but also what is important, that the result by adding, it is like when you have one and you take one out and you rebuild one, at the end you have one. If you have one and you add 50%, at the end you have 1.5. Which means that clearly understand that you bring less, but you have more at the end. So I think the reaction after, it is that the people, they understand this. They understand that they had more, much more than what they could have. And immediately also these undetermined spaces like winter gardens, they allow immediately for the people to do what they never do before, because they have not enough space to do it, to have some more plants, to have an animal, to have more furniture, to have and to also to have this relation with the climate. We have some little films of inhabitants. The old lady, she says, "I prefer my winter garden than my apartment now." And she's talking about very beautifully about his winter garden and the relations with the weather, with the climate. It's very, very nice.
So there were different steps in phases, in fact, in the reaction. At the beginning, of course, the pleasure of having this new space, but also they became very proud, because before the place was really unloved. And they were shown also how it's possible to live there. And afterwards, a lot of other people demand to live there, to have an apartment. And they became, no, we are there, we stay here. And they became very, very proud of it. And it's clear that over the time, the reaction may also depend on some other events, because it's sometimes not a very quiet neighborhood. As everywhere, there may be some problems. They don't stay very long, but so it's also depending on the mood. There are also some new inhabitants, because there is a turnover in the apartments. But I think that all in all, it's a satisfaction. It's yeah.
And what was important? It's interesting because it was not supported really by the municipality. It was not supported by the region, and it was not supported by the state, because there was this also big program of demolition, and it was big against this program. So finally, it was the director of the social housing company that has to deal with this question.
He was strong enough to support the project.
In fact, these buildings built in the 60s, they have no more credit on them, so you just have some rents coming each month. So then he says, okay, we will make not only a refurbishment, we will make a big transformation. So I will go directly to the bank and I will say, instead of demolishing and reconstruction, I will transform, 3 times less money. Can I have a credit for that? It will be paid with the rents that will come in the next 20 or 30 years. And there was no problem for that.
Yeah, because very often it's the question we have, okay, it can be done because it's public social housing, it's subsidized and so on. It cannot be done for any building, for private ownerships. But in this case, in fact, the public participation is less than 20%. And 80% is the own subsidies from the social housing company. So it means that all of the private neighborhoods, they could also do that if they can create a good economical model for this. But it's all these projects, they are very often cited as examples, but we must observe that there are very, very few number of this kind of renovations.
And it is strange because today there is a real crisis. I don't know in England, but in France there is a real crisis about dwellings and flats, number of flats that are available. There are so many families that are looking for affordable flats, and there is not enough that are built each year. There is so much quantity of flats that are built, so it is totally crazy to continue to demolish some flats when we have not the possibility to build new ones enough. So it is precisely, I think, this possibility of transforming, not just a small refurbishment like we saw on the first pictures, because what they have done before, it was just to repaint in brown and yellow the facade, and it is clearly not enough. But you can have something that is really improving a lot the energy consumption, that are repairing the elevators, electricity and things like that, and give a much bigger generosity to the flats that can, at the end, create a sustainable building.
The problem is that, in a way, we never take lessons from the experiences. In the 80s, there was a big program everywhere of renovation of buildings for saving energy, and all of this, especially in France, we know this. It was a very rough intervention with only outdoor insulation, with very bad materials, closing loggias, putting very small windows. And this 20 years later, it was already obsolete. And the building should be renovated again. But what are we doing today? The same, exactly the same. A very low renovation without giving any more quality. So it's and for a lot of money. And in the demolition that we could see in France, most of this building renovated in the 80s by just insulation, they were the first to be demolished. So it's I don't know, sometimes there is something that it takes so long to understand things, and but in the meanwhile, all these buildings have disappeared.
So one more question there. If you could wait for the mic.
Thank you. So I'm struck that you talked about the winter gardens being so enabling, that it enabled people to have a pet, that enabled them to have new experience in relation to the weather, to have plants. Have you ever thought about, or has anyone ever approached you about doing an epidemiological study to see what objective data you might find on improvements to people's well-being compared with a project that's done in a more standard way?
Probably there are, but but in fact, when you see people before and after, you understand very easily that something has changed in their life, in their facility of expression. When we were doing the first meetings and before, at the very early stage of the project, a lot of people they were not speaking. Okay, we are not used that that something is asked to us, and afterwards, most of them, you see that they seem to brace, to have discovered something, because first they have more space, so they are less compressed in the apartment. They can do things. They can have the lunch in 2 or 3 places. They can have sofa here and there. So it can appear simple, but it's changing so much the life.
I think there is a dream about the house with a garden for people, and I think it's a possibility to interpret it in the urban situation. So it means that you don't need to have 500 square meters of garden. If only you have 3 meters or perhaps 10 meters large, you can already do something there. And this is, I think, is very, very important. It is also because you start to do something there. You make sometimes furniture, sometimes some plants, etc. And then you talk with your neighbor because you have something to talk about. It recreates a kind of social relation that it is really interesting. And at the end, it is finally because the house with garden, if you have to go 50 kilometers outside London and you have to take your car for anything to go to the bakery, etc. But you can have this in the city, while in the same time you are very close to all the equipments of the city. You are close to the bakery, you are close to the cinema, you are close to... So you have this kind of relations with outside, with a little garden and winter garden, and you have also all the qualities that the city offers in terms of proximity of the services.
So we have time for one more question. You can, of course, bombard Anne and Jean-Philippe with more questions upstairs over drinks. Does anyone have one? Okay, there.
Hi. You make a really compelling case for the for space equaling freedom, and you know it's very, very beguiling. But I was wondering if there were any circumstances at all where a reduction in space was considered a good thing.
I think no. No, I think we. I didn't. Probably it may happen that we are in so dense situations that we could find this topic of reducing space, but it's not our philosophy. And in any case, we will try and try and try again to find space, and until we arrive to do it. So it's very difficult to have to do things and also the opposite.
It's a difficult question about density. And I think this question of density, sometimes, very often people are afraid about density. But I think that we can think about density, how it is possible to densify the city, but in the same time to give more space for each. And this seems contradictory system that it is really interesting. To working with the existing, it means that you don't have to create new streets, new roads, new networks of energy, etc. When we add 4 meters to this building, finally, yeah, you can see it when you are inside. But in fact, on the plan of the city, it's just a very, very minimum line. So in fact, but we have the same streets, we have no more streets, we have no more electricity. So it is to optimize, to intensify the situations that seems for me important. But in the same time, we should not keep some, the generosity of space. It's something important. So you are in the city, you are in a dense city, you are in a dense systems of roads, of streets, a lot of people in the metro, but when you are at home, you need to have enough space. Not too much, but enough space. And enough space with qualities.
And in fact, density should not be parallel with compression. It's something very different. And because you can, for example, in the neighborhood of 60s, 70s, there is a very high density on the blocks, which compress the living space, but around it's very empty. So it's also sometimes to rethink also case by case, not at a larger scale, not at a large number, but case by case to see how the density could be, more density could be made, because you are right that it's a very important topic in the city to give more possibilities and to avoid to expand cities too much. But if more density leads to more compression of the individual space, it will never be accepted by the people, and that will be probably a problem.
So we have time for just one more question. So could we have the microphone here? And then you can, of course, ask questions upstairs over drinks.
Your lecture travelled north from the south to Paris to Dunkirk, and we're sitting in a cold, dark country, especially today. The Winter Garden, which features throughout, is there a limit to what can be done with the Winter Garden in a country like ours, or further north? Is it a... Well, there we go.
I think the problem it is more if you go south.
Ah.
So it means that the space of the winter garden, when you go south in Spain or south of Spain, it should become a shadow space.
Right.
A space that doesn't need to be separated by a glass window. But I think that probably the winter garden has been invented here, no? It's
the
a bow
window is, is an invention here. It's just an interpretation.
So I think it works quite well, even if you go more north.
Right.
And you have also interesting examples of project of villa using greenhouses in Sweden, for example, it's also places where people, they need the sun rays, so to open the transparency and to have transparency. And it's amazing the energy that the sun provides. Even in London, in the day, as soon as you have a ray of sun crossing the glass, it takes all the radiators that you can have are so really small in terms of energy compared to the sun. Yeah.
So rays of hope, even for our cold, damp city. So can we have a big round of applause for Anne and Jean-Philippe? Thank you so much. Lord Sassoon's going to say thank you to you.
I think we've probably gone, the recording has been cut off, but I'm going to detain you for just 2 more minutes to reinforce a couple of the thank yous and to add a couple more. I'm James Sassoon. I have the pleasure of chairing the trustees of the museum. And I want to start by thanking you, Alice, not only for chairing the jury that presented the medal, but for your orchestrating everything so brilliantly this evening. So thank you, Alice. Bruce, sadly this is the last year of which you will officiate. Not the last year I hope you'll be present, but the last year before your retirement as director. So we owe you a great thank you with David Chipperfield for being at the birth of the medal, and thank you for helping us end it on such a great high note. Thank you to Fiona, wherever you are, Fiona Smith, who led the team here, who managed everything, and you saw at the beginning. To Hamish and Sophie Vassal for supporting this evening, without which we couldn't do it. But what's so important about this evening is that for John Soane, as many of you know, this was not merely a place for wonder and entertainment, which it was, but it was an educational establishment, an academy, and in carrying forward John Soane's wish and mission for the institution, there is nothing more important in our year than the Soane Medal Lecture. So we're incredibly grateful to Lacaton, Vassal, to Anne and to Jean-Philippe for what was an amazing lecture. I mean, Hamish has already said it. I was going to say this, from the heat of the Niger desert to the cold winds of the North Sea at Dunkirk and via Bordeaux, which I found your account of the housing project in Bordeaux really rather moving, and I think this lecture, which will remain out there free for everybody to see for decades to come, will have enormous value. So I'm tempted to pocket your I mean, thank you very much indeed for what I found was a remarkable evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Alice has said, drinks upstairs, but also the back of the house is, I think, open, but do come up for a drink.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful.